I think we're going to have to do this a third time. Oh, yeah.
All right, gentlemen.
All right, we're back. Okay, guys, don't even worry about anything. Yeah, just like, Tumi, just round up your point there, like literally last 30 seconds, just so it doesn't feel weird for the people.
Yeah. My point is just, be discerning about what you consume. Be very, very discerning about what you expose, like your younger siblings to. And let's create a culture where we hold male artists accountable for the art they produce.
Yeah, for sure. Because at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, demand drives what's supplied. That's it. At the end of the day, demand drives what is supplied. So whatever we can tolerate as a society, especially as a society of men, because I believe that male rappers make rap music for men, right?
Yeah.
As soon as we begin to dictate what we want to hear, right, we will then see a change and a shift in the kind of artists that we actually get in the discourse. Bro, I remember, like Chance the Rapper, right? He made a whole transition from like acid rap, Chance the Rapper, like to I don't give a fuck kind of rapper to a really, really positive influence in Chicago and all that kind of stuff. And he releases Coloring Book like in 2016. And Coloring Book is a huge success, and it's basically like a highly positive, high vibrational album, speaking about gang violence in Chicago, speaking about his relationship with God, all of those kinds of things, right? Then Chance gets married like in 2018 or 2019, 2019, and then he announces the release of his album. By the way, he gets 3 Grammys from Coloring Book. He announces on Twitter and many other places that he's releasing a new album. I forgot what the album's called. It's a nice album. And basically the album is about his new found love, marriage, commitment, etc., etc., etc. Bro, usually like when someone releases an album, like everyone's spazzing out on Twitter and whatever. Yeah. So Chance the Rapper makes this announcement, and if you go in the comments, everyone on Twitter, like literally 80% of the people on Twitter in the comments are posting memes and GIFs of people sleeping.
Wow.
What?
Yeah, of people sleeping. Like sleeping, literally. What? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like proper sleeping. The same here. Future drops a mixtape. Future drops a mixtape. He makes the announcement, and Twitter and men on Twitter are going crazy. And there's a hashtag Future Season. It was actually very scary to watch. And the hashtag Future Season was basically pictures of men outrightly doing misogynistic and violent shit to women. Like, I saw a picture, for example, of like 2 dudes with guns and money kind of standing on top of a white woman who's naked. I saw pictures of, the same kind of pictures and images being perpetuated. I saw people saying the most really fucked up stuff on that hashtag. People that I even know, right? That wouldn't ordinarily say that, but because they felt safety in Future and what Future represented, niggas were posting the worst, most misogynistic things that they could post because that's what the market wants. They want to hear a broken man speak about his broken existence and his broken relationship towards women. So that's exactly what we need to work on as audiences, especially as male audiences. Bongs, just from your side, man, just reflect with us, like, how has pop culture shaped and contributed to the way you see women, especially growing up? Like, how did the evolution happen? If you can take it from childhood.
Okay, I think from a very young age, I was one of those weirdo kids. For some reason, I didn't meditate too much on hip hop lyrics necessarily. I listened to hip hop, don't get me wrong. I was a big fan of 50 Cent. Get Rich or Die Trying is probably in, top 10 rap albums I've listened to the most. But I didn't necessarily meditate on it as much as I discovered most of my friends did the older I got. The songs that I meditated on, being the weirdo kid that I was, raised by the parents that I was, were the more romantic pop songs, R&B songs. I was a huge, huge fan of R&B. And so for a huge part of my life, I always saw myself as being distinct from other men because I could quote Usher, you know, I could quote Joe, I could quote Westlife, I could quote Justin Timberlake, whatever. You know, I was listening to 50 Cent, I was listening to G Unit, I was listening to Royce da 5'9", but who I quoted outwardly were the pop stars and the R&B singers who I felt were more gentlemanly and more respectful. So for a very long time, I had this mental distinction going back to the good guy image of myself because I was listening to chivalrous gentlemen. And then, but the problem with listening to chivalrous gentlemen is that you're still meditating on misogyny at the end of the day, right? This idea that, you know, I need to build myself towards being a man who one day could potentially save women. A man who one day will show women a different side of romance, and a man who one day will show women how to be loved by the right guy. And so even when you're listening to that nice guy music, it still paints this image of women as being objects. This time around, they're not necessarily objects to be sexualized, but they're objects to be coddled, objects to be infantilized, and objects to be rescued from whatever they're living. And so for a very long time in my childhood, I meditated on that very, very unhealthy trope. And then came 2009, when the intercessor between all of that nice guy music and all of that hard rap finally got dropped, you know, by Young Money, a young man out of Toronto, Canada, who has gone on to become the biggest rap of the decade. Drake comes along and he gives us this happy medium between that really kind, gentleman-like poetry like R&B and pop music and that really hard misogynistic rap music. And he finally gave guys like myself, and I think even guys like you guys, an outlet, a way to say, I'm going to try and be that nice guy who's there to rescue women and show them a different side of love and romance. But you're
still a consumable.
But if they betray me, then I turn into a rapper. God. Then I turn into a rapper that 50 Cent taught me to be. And so that's what the 2010s ended up doing to my masculinity.
That's such a good point.
They took me from that nice guy R&B pop music fan to Drake, who finally presented the opportunity for nice guys to have their breaking points. You know, Drake introduced me to the breaking point of my niceness and my gentleness.
Don't fuck with me. Don't break this heart.
Yeah, I'll buy you flowers. I'll take you out or whatever. But
I remember.
You betray me,
here's a quick lyric from Drake. She said she misses the old Drake. Girl, don't tempt me.
Exactly. Exactly. So in other words, so and that's the era that we were brought up in. You know, we oftentimes like to compliment the last 10 years of rap music for offering Black men complexity, and I also credit the last 10 years for really reshaping masculinity in hip hop and offering us complexity, because we've gotten Lil Uzi Vert and all of those guys over the last 10 years. However, we have to be very careful in crediting rappers from the 2010s for redefining masculinity, because they didn't. All they did was do the whole nice guy thing and then breaking point, go hard. A nice guy, breaking point, go hard. Nice guy, breaking point, go hard. And so a lot of us men have been convinced that that breaking point is a healthy way of navigating our relationship with women. So that's how pop culture has really, really informed my view of women over the last couple of years, since I was a kid. It's the same thing with film, you know? Film obviously moves with the time as well. And I think that movies over the last 10 years, even romantic movies, unfortunately, I'm a sucker for romantic movies. You know, I've watched all types of romantic movies. I've seen all the Bridget Jones like 4 times or whatever. And even from that very young age, it's so weird how yeah, like R&B and pop music was reflected in the romantic movies that were released back in the 2000s, and romantic movies and even regular comedic and dramatic movies over the last 10 years have reflected the type of music that we listen to, and all of them sort of reinforce that same trope. I remember when The Social Network came out, right? Everyone's
Yeah.
seen The Social Network.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Social Network is a very, very special case movie because whether you are an entrepreneur or a creative or you're working in a steady job, everyone is aspiring towards success at some
Yeah.
level in their lives. And so the Social Network offered a lot of guys the same outlet that Drake offered us, the same outlet
Yes.
that these new age rappers offered us. In other words, I'm going to grind, I'm going to do my thing, blah, blah, blah. And one day, my success will be so blinding to my ex that
Yes.
I will have finally have won against her, right?
Yes.
I'll be the victor in that scenario. And so
Flex on my ex.
flex on my ex, exactly. And so the
Do it.
Social Network for the first time offered, you know, this very hard, not for the first time, we've had movies like that before, but for our generation, that was the biggest depiction of revenge success, but particularly against women. And this idea that if women don't have the right to be angry at you, don't have the right to reject you, don't have the right to decline your advances, and if they do that, then I can always build the next Facebook and use my revenge, use my success as revenge against women. And so it's very important because even in those seemingly innocent movies and TV shows, we've meditated on it. Because once you become aware of the effect of rap music on your life, you then need to go back and look at some of the more innocent films. A lot of black men watch Tyler Perry movies. You know, I don't know why, but you know, niggas like Tyler Perry.
Man.
I spoke about Tyler Perry today with
And niggas really shouldn't. Niggas really shouldn't.
We really, I don't know. So so a lot of men will watch Tyler Perry movies as well. Not to say that all of them are bad. You know, there are some that I don't know resonate. So they'll watch Tyler Perry movies, which also sort of echo that same sentiment that, you know, it's the ball's in the woman's court, and if she messes up, then she'll miss out on an opportunity with a really, really nice guy who could save her from her morally deviant life. And that's the storyline in all of Tyler Perry's movies. So yeah, pop culture, and because the majority of movie producers and directors are men, it means that that narrative will always triumph anyway, you know? So yeah, that's been my relationship, man. It started off with this nice guy stuff, and then Drake comes along and offers me complexity, and then The Social Network comes along and offers me justification for being so angry at women, and using my success as revenge. And essentially, I meditated on all of those things, and it formed the paradigm that I then adopted into my adulthood. So yeah, that's been my journey with pop culture.
And that's so interesting because it goes back to another notion about masculinity there, Bongs, that when men are hurt, they can only express it through violent anger. That's all, right? It's back to one of the chats that we had that, like, God forbid a woman transgresses me and breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Like, God forbid that happens. Because if that happens, she will be met by my wrath. And that's and again, that's the fine line that is often crossed in gender-based violence and in femicide. That man in that moment feels justified by some kind of hurt. And the only way they are taught, and even through the media, the only way they are taught to express these feelings of being hurt and whatever is through overt violence. And even sometimes killing the woman completely. So and like, you know, like about Kanye West and Drake and Lil Uzi Vert, all they did was make the spectrum for masculinity in rap music bigger and wider, but
still enforced it.
The pact is the same, is that we all hate and own women. All of us. The pact is the same, because Lil Uzi Vert, with his eccentricities, his feminine eccentricities, is still a hyper misogynist in his lyrics.
Absolutely.
And that's the same case with Drake. That's the same case with any other rapper that we know. Like, you know, back to other mediums, Bones, like you were speaking about film as well. Stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
Dude, I remember 2016, I want to tell you guys a story, very interesting story. 2016, I'm at this conference called Brightest Young Minds. Very dope conference sponsored by ABSA. At the time, it was still Barclays. And so, you know, it's again, it's the Fees Must Fall generation, right? So it's these millennials, most of which have just come from Fees Must Fall because we're all in university, at least 80% of us. And one of the things that they do, one of the social activities that they make us do is go to the Goliath Comedy Club. So we go to this comedy club, newly established comedy club, and we're really excited. And super famous comedians come out, right? And dude, they're saying the most like messed up misogynistic things. I remember this guy, you know, one of the jokes that he was telling was, it was basically back to that Bernie Mac joke about if you know, don't you ever wish that you can have pussy in a can? I'll be out there shoplifting. You should remember that joke.
Yeah.
So this guy makes he makes the same kind of punchline, and he's like, you know, pussy is so good. Punani is so good. I wish I could be picking punani off a tree. I'd be picking punani like this and this and that, and the crowd wasn't laughing because that crowd, that specific crowd, could recognize the kind of objectification that was happening in order to make an audience laugh. And I was saying too, and like, it was so bad in the end, the whole thing collapsed because Loiso Kola comes out and he basically like fat shames some lady in the audience and whatever. And we basically start heckling him, right? And like he swears at the whole audience and vibes. And the whole thing collapses, and then the Goliath brothers give everyone cake and apologize. But like on our way home, you know, the reflection that I was just having with my friends there was that like, yo, on any other night, those jokes would have been funny.
Yeah.
Like that was just the wrong night. It was just the wrong audience. Any other audience would have appreciated all of those jokes.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem is that we laugh at stereotypes that we can tolerate, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing as an audience. That's what we laugh. We laugh at when nannies get off the tree and oh my gosh, we should pick them off. And you know what I mean? And he was trying to make like a really weird you know, meta situation. But it demands.
I think Tommy cut there. He'll have to rejoin our call. No, it's okay. It's okay. But yeah, I think it's quite interesting that he points out the whole issue around stand-up comedy because growing up as well, I think, ironically, one of the most intelligent people and one of the most discerning people that we ever encountered were probably stand-up comedians who we always kind of assumed were different to rappers and other people like that because of how eloquent and intelligent they sounded. But again, you know, if you go back to some of the things that stand-up comedians were normalizing and some of the things that they wanted us to be okay with, it's quite scary. Tammy, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm listening.
All right. Yeah, I was just speaking about stand-up comedy and how it's so weird how it's evolved over time. Because we always thought that stand-up comedians were one of the smartest people that we've ever engaged. I mean, but I think both of you have seen the obviously none of us were around in the 1980s, but the Eddie Murphy special where he talks
Delirious.
about Delirious in 1981 about how you can't smack women anymore. And the audience was just dying laughing. And so that progressed in the 2000s to when Dave Chappelle was also making jokes or things like rape denialism and all of those things that we then end up meditating on. And the older we got, the more we started normalizing things like rape denialism. I think rape denialism found a place in our society and in our generation, because if you look back at stand-up comedy from the 2000s to the 2010s, there were a lot of rape jokes, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And a lot of them
rape
had
jokes.
to do with reducing rape, ridiculing it, and just sort of casting it aside as something that can't possibly happen, especially when famous men are in question. And those are the attitudes that we ended up adopting going forward. But yeah, Tammy, you were saying.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I'm just going to flow off what you were saying as well. Guys, I'm sorry. My internet connection is up and down. But yeah, and then in 2016, we learned that Louis C.K. was masturbating on some of his female team members on yachts, like literally taking out his penis and masturbating in front of them. You know what I'm saying? Just to show that, like, he meant what he said in his jokes.
He wasn't joking.
He wasn't joking, right? He wasn't joking when rape denialist jokes were being made. It wasn't a joke, right? Because I am Louis C.K. and I can whip out my dick and masturbate in front of the women that work for me and think it is okay. And it will only come out like 7 years later off the strength of the Me Too movement. Because again, it takes an audience to drive change. And now what's happening in stand-up comedy, you know, before I'll make this point before I get to the next question, you know, is that you have a bunch of Dave Chappelle's, in my opinion, who are doing the same things that Donald Trump and them are doing and Kanye West is doing by saying, we're here to defend free speech. Why is everybody being a bitch? And why is everybody being so fucking sensitive? Blah, blah, blah. You know, because they want to be able to get away with making trans jokes, bro.
Yeah.
Homophobic jokes.
Yeah.
Misogynistic jokes. And they're so confused as to what's the right thing to say and what's the wrong thing to say. But like, hello, it's just clear. Like the fault lines are already there. You understand? Like you don't have to make comedy out of women's bodies and trans people's bodies and queer people's bodies, etc. They're just not funny. Find new material.
Literally.
So
and
here's
it's
my
really
next
not that difficult either, you know?
It isn't that difficult at all. And here's my next question, and I think from there we can even flow it off, gents. Just a quick discussion about like how pop culture, rap music, has contributed to labeling, because we speak about how it's contributed to how we perceive women, the picture that we have of women, but it also gave us further language and vocabulary to label women. So let's speak about, just briefly, like literally, it's open-ended, right? How rap music and the likes have contributed to the words, us using the words bitch, hoe, slut, thought, that's the recent one, broad, right? Basically, have you found yourself in a situation, and I'll start with you, Frank, where you've used any of these words, even in your private capacity, right? Because we're speaking about how these meditations translate. And how did those words, the labeling, how did it actually work in your real life? Because we want to show the audience like just how real life this shit is.
Man, it goes back to the era that I grew up in. You know, we when I first created a Twitter account, by the way, Twitter was very, very different in 2011, 2012 to what it is now. Very, very different. So it was an incredibly misogynistic environment. I remember one of the first few pages I followed was wife that hoe, wife that girl, wife that bitch. Those are 3 separate pages. So the lack of creativity was quite glaring. Those are 3 separate pages all about the same topic. Let's distinguish between wifeable girls and wifeable women and women who are hoes. And so it definitely contributed to the language that I was using at the time, this idea that like there were certain girls that I put in the category of wifeable simply because of how respectable they were, or how modestly they dressed, how modestly they spoke, and all of those things. And so the word that I found myself, or the term that I found myself using a lot, was definitely wife material, and wifeable and so on. And to be
What
honest,
garbage.
it's yeah, and I'd be lying if I said that I stopped using that term in 2011. It did carry on deep into my adulthood, and I probably only stopped using that term very, very recently. And so, yeah, it's quite scary because of just the number of women that I completely outcast as a result of not being wife material. And the word that, and so in the binary of wife material and other women were hoes, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously that's the term that I would use interchangeably with just, yeah, women who weren't modest, that weren't desirable to my eye, and all of those things. And so rap music normalized it, but especially the Boondocks, you know, that's something else that a lot of us in our generation consumed, ended up forming our opinions and hatred towards women, is the Boondocks. So this idea that at the time it was quite a revolutionary cartoon, because we'd never seen Black people represented, or at least Black Americans, obviously not our experience, but you know, because a lot of us consumed American media, the Boondocks was influential as a result of that. So yeah, the term hoe was also quite impactful as a result of that. I used it in my own spaces all the time, and stopped only a few years back, not enough years back, but only a few years back. Rap music also reinforced that, because the Boondocks is interchangeable with hip hop culture, which were also interchangeable with Twitter culture at the time. And so, yeah, I think that's how it affected the way that not only how I see women, but the language that I used in real life. It's weird because eventually our parents also started using that language in a bit to be cool. So yeah, especially younger parents who are on social media and listen to the music that we listen to, they started using that lingo. And so eventually the word hoe starts becoming commonplace at our dinner tables, at braais and stuff like that, even by our elderly parents. The term wife materials also starts becoming quite commonplace in our spaces with parents, aunts, and uncles who are slightly older than us. So yeah, that's definitely how it's affected the lingo that I use. I've also found myself, this is an exercise that I know a lot of us have spoken about before. Whenever Facebook brings up memories of the stuff that you used to post back in the day, yeah, like every second, third Facebook post had the word hoe in it. Just like, because I always shared the stuff that I read on Twitter and then shared on Facebook as well, because I found it so fascinating that like the word was being destigmatized in the echo chamber that I was in at the time. And so now finally I can use it because we all get the context. But yeah, obviously it was never okay.
Yeah, dude. I mean, like we mustn't also forget that like labeling also has space in the vernacular in the vernacular arena. You know, like for example, my chance and them. Let's kind of about my chance, right? We're speaking about rap music and whatever, and we are these like edgy millennials, but like Migwanti Bitoria, Migwanti,
what a dark
like Migwanti, like it's a term, like you know, my cousin would, yo, give me Gwanti. You know what I'm saying? Mugwanti. You know what I'm saying? Skeberesh. And those kinds of things.
Sorry to disturb you. You know what the scary thing is? To this day, there's still a stigma around women from Pretoria as a result of that.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, all kind of falling under one specific category. So labeling is everywhere because pop culture is so prevalent and pervasive, and it's not just American pop culture. What I want to emphasize is that like we have our own misogynistic lingo in our own native languages and tongues, in our own urban colloquies. To me, your reflections on that. How have you used these words?
You know, like I'm just thinking about, I guess, how like women's sexuality is used as like a commercial tool to sell music, right? To sell popular culture. And I think in creating that distinction, like Bongani says, between women who are wife material and women who are hoes, right?
Yeah.
You know, you think about like how. So I cannot honestly I could never honestly say that listening to rap music has only informed my language. It's informed everything down to how I like, you know, view women and how I've always perceived
Yeah.
women, you know. I and to this day, I still, you know, you look at a music. I haven't watched music videos in a really, really long time, but you look at like music videos like All Eyes on Me, right? With
Mm.
again in the local context, the local setting, and it's women in underwear walking around a mansion, and the male figures are always in this position of power, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's gone so far beyond just informing my language. But I think the whole distinction between who's wife material and who's a hoe, it comes down to it comes down to your sexuality is mine to exploit, right?
Mm.
And
Yo.
like, because we're constantly sexualizing women, right? We
Yeah.
never stop. Even respectable women, we sexualize all day long, right? But
Yeah. Respectable being a loaded word as well.
when women exactly respectable women,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, um, so yeah, so like we sexualize what we understand to be respectable women all the time, and when women take that agency back, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
when women say my sexuality is mine, right? You
Yeah.
don't own it, and I'm going to use it like this. That's when they become a hoe. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
it's oh man, it's so crazy how I don't think I'd ever be able to fully unpack, or at least I don't have the language to fully unpack how it's impacted the way I view women. And it's it has
Mm.
literally made women consumable objects to me, you
Mm.
know? Especially I think to times when I've been I found myself in a social setting where you know you think back when you were still in second year or third year, and what what's the marker of a good night out, you know, came down to how many women you can consume. You know,
Mm.
Oh
that's
yes.
what made a good night, you know. And
Yes.
when you're out with friends, it's and yeah, you're not looking for white material women, what you understand to be or deem
No.
to be white material women, you know.
Nope.
And it's just,
Looking for
I don't know, man.
hoes.
I think we can never say
You're
we're
looking
looking
for
for
hoes,
hoes,
bro.
you know.
Mm.
And I don't
Mm.
think we could ever say that it's never impacted how we how I don't think we could ever say that the language is harmful. I guess is the point that I'm making, you know.
Mm.
But I think
Yeah.
you speak of like Dave Chappelle. I think what stand up comedy over time has become more and more uncomfortable for me to watch, just because you're like, oh, dude, that's a terrible thing to say, you know. But I've
Yeah.
noticed that discomfort only really happens when I watch stand up comedy in my partner's company or with together with any of the women in my life. Whereas
Yeah.
when I consume stand up comedy alone, when Dave Chappelle says, "I'm so good I can tell jokes backwards," the premise that I'm gonna start the joke off with, "So I kicked her in
Oh,
the pussy."
bro.
I killed
Bro.
myself when I heard that for the first time, and
Can you
that's just
believe that? That's the first thing he
that's
says.
special. He said that.
I
That's the
kicked her
first
in
thing
the
he said,
pussy.
and I was like,
Wow.
I kicked her in the pussy, and you're just like, okay, it made me uncomfortable initially, but not because it was an awful thing to say. It was because like I'm sitting there thinking, oh man, I can't love Dave publicly anymore, you know.
Mm.
Yeah,
And
publicly, huh?
yeah, just like
That being the
it comes down to when
operative
you
word.
publicly. Exactly. I can't love Dave publicly anymore. And I think the language is so powerful, dude. I think it's I genuinely believe that if you say something out loud, whether you believe it at first or not, you're going to believe it at some point, you know?
Yeah.
Um and Yeah, dude, it's crazy. It's crazy. I think back to times when I listen to stand up comedy on my own and listen to music on my own, and there's always this huge distinction between how I receive in the presence of other women or of women, and how I receive it when I'm on my own. So yeah,
Yeah.
dude, it means that when I'm on my own, when I'm with other men, I'm going to use words used by stand-up comedians. I'm going to use the word bitch. I'm going to use the word hoe, um, and yeah, that's how it is, man.
Yeah. Jeez, man. Look, and I think because I also want to like kind of unpack my story, but like, capitalism is going to chow us again. So, Bones, can we just redo this call and then we're just going to conclude on the other side?
No problemo.
Guys, relax wherever you are. We'll be fine.